So catastrophism is what best explains geology.
Does it? Cool. But allow me to check that for myself. You know, with you being a well-established liar and everything. Well, would you look at that? In geology, catastrophism theorizes that the Earth has been largely shaped by sudden, short-lived, violent events, possibly worldwide in scope. Does this mean that Matt Powell is actually going to be honest for once? Well, let's not get carried away. This is Matt Powell after all. Please subscribe.
Now, if you talk to an evolutionist, usually they'll say that uniformitarianism is the mechanism that we know explains the past.
Do they really? And your examples of people saying this is probably no one ever? Or are you just trying to confuse me with big words again? Uniformitarianism is the theory that changes in the Earth's crust during geological history have resulted from the action and continuous uniform processes. For example, the reshaping of a coastline by a tsunami, deposition of mud by a flooding river, the devastation brought by a volcanic explosion, or a mass extinction caused by an asteroid impact. Hang on a second, I see what's going on here.
But the problem with that is that it does not explain the formations that we see even in the rocks.
And creationism does? Now, I've made lots of videos about little Matty Powell, and they all have one constant theme. He says, you think the Earth is billions of years old? That's really stupid, which is fine, because I pretty much do exactly the same thing, but from the other side of the argument. However, I at least try to offer some sort of explanation as to why what Matt is saying is wrong. He doesn't even bother doing that. Remember, Matt, saying that someone else is wrong doesn't make you right, unless of course you're me, saying that young Earth creationists are wrong. Then it's completely fine.
All throughout the world, we find bent rock layers. According to evolution, rocks and mountains slowly formed through plate tectonic shifts.
Look, I don't want to be the guy that constantly interrupts people to correct them, but I think if you check, you'll find that it's science that says that, not evolutionists. Because evolutionist is just a term used by butthurt religious people as a label that they feel needs to be slapped really firmly onto people that don't believe the same garbage as them. And to go one step further, science doesn't tell us that mountains go through tectonic shifts. It actually shows us in the form of this little thing that we science types like to call evidence. Science types like me. What? I like science? Doesn't that make me a science type?
Well, I'm sorry, the rocks simply would have crumbled and they would have broken. They would not have bent, okay?
Now, I can't be sure, obviously, but I think what you're talking about is fold mountains. And fold mountains are created where two or more of Earth's tectonic plates are pushed together. At these colliding, compressing boundaries, rocks and debris are warped and folded into rocky outcrops, hills, mountains, and even entire mountain ranges. I have tried to find more information on what little Matty is talking about here, but with him being so vague in his description, I can't be completely sure that we're talking about the same thing. But if you Google curved mountains, you get a buttload of answers in Genesis results and one or two actual results. Like, for example, in structural geology, a fold is a stack of originally planar surfaces, such as sedimentary strata that are bent or curved during permanent deformation. A rock becomes permanently deformed when it is subjected to different stresses that exceed its strength under the conditions of deformation. So broadly defined, strength is the resistance a material offers to fracture or flow.
And that proves that these layers were soft and moist upon the time of their formation, and that they were all formed in one event and then solidified into sedimentary rock. And so it's just great proof, great evidence that we can show people that the flood of Noah is what caused the catastrophic events that we see in the past, not uniformitarianism and just slow and gradual changes in the Earth's crust.
But like I said earlier, Matt, you wanting it to be that doesn't make it so. I can see why you would want it to have happened suddenly, but the fact still remains that it didn't. It literally takes millions of years for these things to occur, which doesn't lend itself well to a 6,000-year-old Earth, so yeah.
We also find identical amounts of C14 in coal seams across the world.
No, we don't. The carbon-14 in coal is probably produced de novo. That means at the beginning. Yeah, I know some big words, even though those were technically two very small words that just sounded important. Shut up. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, the carbon-14 in coal is probably produced de novo by radioactive decay of the uranium-thorium isotope series that is naturally found in rocks and which is found in varying concentrations concentrations in different rocks, hence the variation of carbon-14 content in different coals. But you know, I'm just a stupid atheist and definitely not a scientist, so you shouldn't trust anything I say. You should trust the guy that cherry picks little bits out of scientific papers that he thinks support his arguments.
Now, C14 only lasts 50,000 years. So if you have a layer forming, and then it solidifies, and then C14, or coal getting smashed in between those layers, vegetation, that over time is going to lose its C14 because the half-life is 5,730 years. So C14 is not going to last over 50,000 years in anything that it is encapsulated in. The fact that we find identical amounts of C14 in all of the coal seams across the world is great evidence that all of those layers are the same age and that they were all laid down in one event.
So what you're saying then is it isn't actually evidence at all? Because we don't, you great gangly knuckled greasy head bag piece of thing. You.
Sorry, I got a bit carried away there.
Like I said, catastrophism best explains the past. Catastrophism is what we would predict as part of Noah's flood. It would cause the most catastrophic events that you could possibly imagine and leave behind the evidence that we see today.
So where is it then? The evidence, I mean. There is absolutely zero evidence to support a global flood unless I've missed something. And more to the point, where are you seeing it? And why are you not sharing it? You can't possibly mean that because it says it in the Bible it's true. I would have thought that even you would know that that isn't what evidence is. There was a global flood because of the Bible. Really?
One of the other things that we continuously find on all mountains is sea life and crustaceans, and in some cases we find clams or mollusks that are as big as cars in the closed position on the top of Mount Everest, for example.
Now if that picture is your example of clams the size of cars, I can't help but wonder how big that guy is, or how small the cars are in Alabama. But please go on. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say next.
Now, keep in mind, when creatures like this die in nature, naturally they open up. The muscle will relax and a scavenger will come and eat them. But the fact that we find them in a closed position, clams that are as big as cars, proves that they were buried by catastrophism, by Noah's flood, and then pushed up through the mountain through plate tectonics.
Or does it prove that A, you have no idea what you're talking about, 2, that you're talking out of your bunghole in a frantic attempt to sound smart, or C, that the sheer weight of whatever engulfed these clams forced the shell to shut? And anyway, I always thought that if a clam died, the shell shut. But what do I know? I don't even eat fish fingers, let alone any other seafood, because it's gross. And fish haven't actually got fingers, so what exactly are you eating? Anyway, you were saying, Matt?
In a rapid event. Think about it, if the whole world, I believe, would be eroded in less than 2 million years, all mountains would be eroded flat. How is it that it takes millions of years for mountains to form?
Well, funny you should ask. And to be perfectly honest, I have no idea. But that doesn't stop me usually, so why would today be any different? Now, I know that young Earth cretins like a stupid example, so here's mine. Which can you do more quickly? Build an IKEA wardrobe or smash it to bits with a hammer? Usually halfway through trying to build it, which I've never done. I'm excellent at building flat pack furniture.
Gravity causes everything to erode flat over time. The reason that mountains exist and that clams on top of mountains exist in the closed position is because of Noah's flood, because of catastrophism.
Hang on a second, maybe gravity would cause everything to eventually erode flat, but for that to be the case, wouldn't that mean that there would have to be no opposite force in action? And what I mean by that is tectonic shifts. For some reason, if tectonic shifts were to completely stop, then I suppose eventually, all mountain ranges would flatten out. Maybe, I don't actually know or care. But tectonic shifting is a thing, so just thought I would throw that one out there.
Another thing that we continuously find in mountains across the world is whales. Entire whales are found perfectly preserved on the top of mountains.
I knew you meant those whales. I'm not an idiot. I just love whales. It's an awesome place to live.
That can only be explained by Noah's flood. Noah's flood put those whales on the mountain and buried them in a catastrophic event. Uniformitarianism cannot explain this.
So Noah's flood did that floaty thing and got the whales to the top of a mountain, and somehow, when the water began to subside, the whales didn't stay in the water and end up back in the sea, or did this magical Bible water subside so quickly that the whales got left behind? You know, they were really stupid whales and they just hopped out of the water to have a rest and sit on top of the mountains admiring the view, and then the magic tide went out and they got left behind and died up there.
The only way that you're going to get a perfectly preserved whale in nature is by catastrophism, once again by Noah's flood, especially on the top of mountains. It proves that while the continents were moving and the fountains of the deep broke open, as the Bible says.
Oh, well, I feel silly now. You didn't mention that the Bible said it happened. I mean, everybody knows that everything in the Bible totally happened, and that the best proof is that the Bible says it did, so it must be true.
That certain of the crust of the earth was subducted, causing catastrophic plate tectonics, and those mountains were pushed up and the whale fossils were pushed up with them. The whales before they had become fossilized. And remember, fossilization is not about time.
Isn't it? Oh, right. Well, in that case, silly me again. There's me thinking that fossils are defined as the remains or traces of organisms that died more than 10,000 years ago. Therefore, by definition, the minimum time it takes to make a fossil is 10,000 years. Ah, now I see it. You don't like fossils either, because they are older than you think the Earth is.
According to evolution, it takes 10,000 years at least to get a fossil to form, yet we find fossilized teddy bears.
Isn't it strange that whenever a creation scientist, don't laugh, apparently it's a thing, but whenever a creation scientist mentions something really silly and you Google it, all the results you find come from other really smart creation scientists. Now, I did get some results about petrified teddy bears. Poor things, what were they so scared of? But all the results that mention fossilized teddy bears are from answers in Genesis, to name but one very reliable source.
We even have a fossilized pickle in our creation museum.
Pickle? Whatever you say, Matt. I mean, I am clearly no match for your superior intellect. And if it's in such a world-renowned facility as the Creation Museum, then it must be really real, mustn't it?
Anybody that would say that fossilization is about time is just not educated on the topic. Fossilization is about conditions. And just the fact that people believe that fossilization takes up to 10,000 years, and they'll use that as a crutch to disprove the Bible, it's ridiculous.
We all know that's the exact reason why you and your fellow church peeps hate the fact that we can quite easily calculate the age of the Earth from fossils, and that is clearly the reason you make such stupid claims. You have to, because the other option is admitting that you may possibly be wrong about the Earth being 6,000 years old.
We even find a fossilized ichthyosaur giving birth. Now, I don't know of any creature that takes 10,000 years to give birth to their young. I mean, if they did, that'd be a pretty painful birth.
I don't think that's how fossilization works. Whatever is fossilized almost certainly would have died, and in this case, during childbirth. And then very slowly, over a period of at least 10,000 years, would have become fossilized. The way you've explained it leads me to believe that you actually think that fossilization starts while the creature is still alive, and then that creature slowly dies over the course of the fossilization process.
It's not that these fossils took 10,000 years to form. It's that they were buried in catastrophic conditions.
And then slowly fossilized over at least the next 10,000 years. Yeah, we know, Matt. And we also know that you have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. And it shows.
Catastrophism and Noah's flood is the reason why these things even exist. I mean, when people argue against it, they're arguing against the very mechanism that even put those things there to begin with. The fossils that we're talking about. I mean, to even get a fossil, you have to have rapid burial. The only way that you're going to get that throughout the entire column is by Noah's flood. It had to be catastrophic by the definition of what a fossil even is, or what the column even is. You ask an evolutionist or even an atheist, what is the geologic column made out of?
Well, that's an easy one. I don't even need to look it up. The geological column is made up of the salty tears of young Earth creationists. Now, obviously, I'm kidding. Or am I? It's made up of sedimentary rock.
Sedimentary rock is defined as rock that was laid down by water.
It isn't though, Matt, is it? Sedimentary rocks are formed from pre-existing rocks or pieces of once living organisms. They form deposits that accumulate on the Earth's surface. Sedimentary rocks often have distinctive layering or bedding.
So they're literally admitting, just by admitting that it is sedimentary rock that these animal fossils are found in, that it is rock that was laid down by water, by catastrophism, by Noah's flood. There's really no way around it. I think that the best way to explain the past is not by using the present, but is by using the catastrophic events that are spoken of in the Bible, and also that we see the evidence of throughout the world around us.
And when you show us where this evidence is, then maybe we consider the remote, teeny, tiny chance that you were right and we were all wrong. But until that day comes, I suggest you do what you do best and keep producing content for people like me to laugh at. Love you, bye.
Alright, watch this next. But before you do, make sure you subscribe by order of the Creaky Blinder.